Do you want to get into his mind and never leave? Then listen closely. You don't need to beg, you don't need to chase, and even less do you need to win his love. What you need is something far more powerful. Learning how to inhabit his unconscious, to become that energy that unsettles him, that touches him somewhere he can't even identify. Because when a woman gets into a man's mind from her place of power, there's no message, no silence, no excuse that can erase her. And that's not achieved by being perfect. It's achieved by mastering the art of what isn't said, what isn't given, and what is simply radiated. Today I'm not going to give you empty phrases or fairy tale promises. Today I'm going to teach you how to turn your presence into an emotional imprint he can't ignore. From the deep psychological desire that Jung explained, to the kind of energetic attraction that simply can't be faked. I'm going to take you from being the woman who waits to be chosen to being the woman who becomes unforgettable. From anxious pursuit to the kind of energy that leaves traces without even touching. This video is for you, if you're ready to stop begging for love and start igniting minds. So hit that powerful like button and subscribe. That's all it takes to become part of this channel. Let's dive in. If you don't become unforgettable to yourself, you'll never be unforgettable to him. There's a truth no one has told you. No one can stay in someone's mind if they haven't first powerfully inhabited their own. Do you want to get into his mind? Do you want to be that woman he can't forget, even as the days go by, even if he tries to distract himself, even if he never says it out loud? Then there's something you need to deeply understand, and it's this. You can't make an impact on a man's unconscious if you haven't left an indelible mark on your own. And this is where many women fail, because they want to be remembered without ever truly recognizing themselves. They chase someone else's desire without ever choosing themselves first. They beg for mental crumbs when they've never given themselves an emotional feast. Carl Jung said, "What is not made conscious manifests in our lives as fate." And in this case, that fate is being forgotten. If you don't become aware of your greatness, of your unique energy, of your one-of-a-kind story, then your presence won't leave a mark. It will just fade away. And do you know when everything starts to change? When the way you talk to yourself changes. When you go from asking, "Does he like me?" to asking, "Do I like this version of myself?" Your energy shifts when you no longer need him to look at you, because you can't stop looking at yourself. Your vibration rises when you become unforgettable to yourself. You become emotionally dangerous because you stop asking and start projecting. You stop begging and start radiating. You stop pleading for connection and become a frequency that can't be ignored. Let me tell you a true story that illustrates this perfectly. Her name is Marion. For 3 years, she was obsessed with a man who kept coming and going, who sought her out, desired her, but then vanished for days, even weeks. Marion was glued to her WhatsApp, to his likes, to his words. Every silence from him was a wound for her. Until one day, after another sudden disappearance, he came back and told her, "I feel like you're the safe option, but there's something in me that doesn't get activated with you the way I wish it did." That sentence destroyed her, but it also woke her up. That night, Marion cried like never before. But instead of figuring out how to get him back, she asked herself, "Why am I not unforgettable to him?" And then the truth came to her. Because I forgot about myself. Because I erased myself so he'd notice me. Because I dimmed my light so he could shine. From that day on, Marion decided she would stop trying to be memorable for him, and instead be memorable for herself. She went back to dancing alone in her room, writing in her journal, dressing for herself, looking at her reflection with love instead of judgment. And the most incredible thing happened weeks later. He came back, but this time confused. He told her, "I don't know what you did, but I can't get you out of my head. I feel like I've lost you, and I can't stop thinking about you." But by then, Marion wasn't the same woman anymore, because she had conquered him without trying to. She had gotten into his mind only after returning to the center of her own soul. And here's the secret. It's not about doing anything external. You don't need to manipulate, fake, or be perfect. You only need to remember yourself so powerfully, so authentically, that your essence keeps vibrating even after you've walked away. The male unconscious doesn't attach to the woman who begs. It attaches to the woman who radiates. It stays obsessed with the one who didn't give herself away out of anxiety, but offered herself from a place of power. That's the magnetic woman. That's the woman who enters his mind and never leaves. And if you're here listening to this, it's because you can be that woman too. But only if you first become the most unforgettable woman to yourself. Now get ready, because what comes next is even more powerful. The second point is going to show you how your own invisible thoughts are what ultimately place you in his mind or erase you from it without you even realizing. You're going to discover what you project, even in silence. What a man can't stop thinking about is the woman who made him feel emotionally dominated without saying a word. Let me pause briefly to ask you something from my heart. I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. That's what allows me to keep creating these heartfelt messages, and the best part is, it's totally free for you. So if you want to keep raising your energy with this community, subscribe now, and let's move on to the most powerful part that's coming. There's something no man will ever admit to you, but it's screaming inside his unconscious without him knowing it. It's not your words. It's not what you did to try to make him like you. It's not how much you supported him or how attentive you were. What truly leaves a mark on him, what stays on his skin and in his mind like an invisible tattoo, is that energy of yours that throws him off balance without you having to say a single word. Carl Jung spoke of the power of the unconscious as a force that transcends the rational. And in the game of emotional attraction, that force gets triggered, not when you try to convince a man, but when he finds himself unable to get you out of his head because you've become pure vibration, because you made him feel small, confused, and full of desire without saying a thing. And that, to him, is unforgettable. That woman who enters silently, who doesn't force things, who isn't trying to please, but whose presence is so potent that he feels something inside him changed when she was there. That's the woman he can't stop remembering. I'll tell you another story that proves this. Her name is Sabrina. Sabrina wasn't the most attentive, or the most devoted, or the one who talked the most. In fact, the man even told her that he didn't fully understand her, that it seemed like she was hiding something. But whenever he tried to distance himself, he felt like he couldn't breathe. And when she was near, he felt challenged, as though he could never fully figure her out. Why? Because Sabrina never felt the need to explain herself. She never gave long speeches. She never tried to say, "Look how valuable I am." She was simply there, being present, being herself. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she didn't chase it. She smiled calmly, but also knew how to hold silence without discomfort. She could walk into a room and have everyone notice her, without even trying to get anyone's attention. And that's what trapped him. That's what made him think about her again and again, even when he was with other women. Because Sabrina wasn't trying to prove anything. And precisely because of that, he couldn't stop thinking about all that he hadn't been able to conquer in her. Do you understand what this means? When you stop trying to tell him who you are, but instead make him feel something he's never felt before, you stop being an option. You become an enigma, an emotional experience he can't decode. And for a man's mind, that is addictive. Because a man doesn't get attached to what's obvious. He gets attached to what challenges his emotional core. He doesn't stay with the woman who pleases him. He stays trapped by the one who confronted him emotionally without ever having to raise her voice. She's the woman who, without saying, "I'm leaving," makes him feel like he could lose her. She's the woman who, without sending him a long paragraph, makes him think about her all day. She's the woman who, without needing to prove her worth, forces him to face his fear of not being enough for her. The male unconscious remembers intensely the woman who made him feel emotionally dominated effortlessly, because that's where his wounds get triggered, and that's where his drive awakens to try to solve what he didn't understand. And in that attempt, he becomes trapped. That's why the key is not how much you seek him out, but how much you make him feel when you're not seeking him at all. And this isn't achieved by being cold, arrogant, or distant on purpose. It's achieved when you no longer need to make noise to leave an impact, when your silence says more than 1,000 conversations, when your peace disturbs him because he can't touch it, The most powerful feminine energy isn't the one that chases, it's the one that observes. The one who doesn't try to be enough because she already is. The one who doesn't come into his life to stay, but when she leaves, he feels like a part of him left with her. That is the presence that's never forgotten. If you want to get into his mind and never leave, don't try to control him with words. Make him feel dominated without him even understanding why. Make him desire you without you ever asking for it. Make him imagine you without fully revealing yourself. Because in that space of emotional mystery is where true unconscious connection is born. And what comes next is even more revealing. In the next point, you're going to understand how unconscious male attachment gets triggered when he sees something in you that he can never fully possess. And that's where his obsession begins. Your absence torments him more than 1,000 messages from you ever could. You've been led to believe that to stay on a man's mind, you have to remind him constantly. Texting him, calling him, dropping hints, asking if he still feels the same. But listen to me very carefully. There is nothing that weighs more heavily in the male unconscious than a well-placed absence. An absence that doesn't scream, that doesn't justify itself, that simply is, without being there. Because in a world where everyone is trying to grab attention by shouting, the real emotional imprint is left by the one who retreats in silence, but leaves her energy vibrating behind. And this isn't about playing games. It's about knowing your worth, about letting the echo of your presence speak louder than any written words, about turning your silence into a presence more powerful than all the noise in his mind. Let me tell you a true story that illustrates this perfectly. Vanessa loved with all her heart, and she knew it. And he knew it too. But there was something in her that was overflowing, a constant need to keep reconfirming that she was being seen, valued, considered. Every day it was gestures, messages, reminders of "I'm here, don't ignore me." Until one day, he simply stopped responding, and she felt her world collapse. She clung even harder, sending long messages, making calls that went unanswered, crying tears no one saw. Until something shifted, not outside, but inside her. Vanessa remembered something her therapist once told her. Rooted in Jung's psychology, those who haven't cultivated their own worth try to force connections out of emptiness. And that phrase hit her like a bolt of lightning because she finally understood. It wasn't her presence she needed to prove. It was her absence she needed to value. That day, she stopped writing. She didn't block him. She didn't explain herself. She just withdrew. Not out of resentment, lighting, but from her own center. She began to reclaim her energy, to rebuild herself, to become magnetic for herself again. And that's when the unexpected happened. He came back, but not with a simple "hey." He returned disarmed, with words like, "I haven't been able to get you out of my mind. I miss you without you even saying a word. I don't know what you did, but I can't forget you." Why? Because the male unconscious doesn't respond to control. It responds to the vibrational emptiness that gets triggered when a woman stops begging and begins to reign in her own world. Carl Jung said, "Everything we repress gets projected." And what a man represses when he feels he's truly losing you becomes an obsessive projection. His mind fills up with you without him realizing it. Your silence hurts him, your image haunts him. He wonders who you're with, why you're no longer seeking him, what changed. And what changed wasn't on the outside. It was your vibration. What torments a man isn't that you don't love him. It's that you stop showing it without warning. That you're no longer where he always found you. That what used to be constant has become silence. But that silence, when it comes from your inner strength, carries a frequency that hooks into his mind like an emotional fishhook and never leaves. That's how the unconscious mind works. It doesn't attach to what it has all the time. It becomes obsessed with what it can't decipher. That's why if you want to get into his mind and never leave, let mystery do its work. Learn how to disappear without drama. Leave with elegance, with power. Learn to not be there, and let that move him more than any words you could ever say. Because when you become a present absence, he starts searching for you in every place where you're not. And what he seeks with his mind but can't find with his eyes becomes an addiction. And this isn't manipulation. This is strategic, energetic presence. It's knowing that your energy is not to be lowered, it's to be elevated. that your value is not to be begged for, it's to be vibrated, that your power is not to be explained, it's to be felt. And when you understand this, when you truly integrate it, something changes in you forever. You no longer chase, you no longer test, you no longer explain. You simply exist. And that alone is enough for his soul to remember you, even when you've stopped thinking about him. Now stay tuned, because in the next part I'm going to reveal something that completely changes how he perceives you unconsciously. It's not what you do that makes you unforgettable. It's how you make him feel when you're not even there. Get ready, because what's coming could become your most powerful weapon if you know how to use it. To get into his mind, you have to reflect back to him what he doesn't even understand about himself. There's one thing people never forget: the person who showed them parts of themselves they didn't even know existed. And in the case of a man, this is doubly powerful, because he might be surrounded by options, beautiful, intelligent, even available women, but his mind doesn't get tangled up with the obvious. It gets tangled up with the symbolic, with what he can't fully decode, with what makes him feel like he's looking at himself in another body. And that's where you become unforgettable. Not because you said something impressive, not because you turned yourself into some forced version of yourself, but because without even realizing it, you reflected a piece of his shadow or his soul back to him. And that haunts him. Let me share a real story that shows exactly how this phenomenon works. Sabrina, an extremely intuitive woman but deeply rooted in her inner world, met Julian during a business coaching program. She barely spoke. She smiled, but wasn't trying to please anyone. She never tried to catch his attention. In fact, she seemed more interested in taking notes than in connecting. Yet there was one phrase Sabrina said in a brief conversation that echoed in Julian's mind for weeks afterward. Sometimes we choose goals that are really just trying to fill an older emptiness. He didn't know why that sentence affected him so deeply. He didn't know it came from a woman who wasn't trying to seduce him. But that phrase lit up a mirror inside him. Because without knowing it, Julian was trapped in a need for validation that went all the way back to his childhood. And this woman, who had no intention of capturing him emotionally, had revealed his oldest wound with one sentence. And from that moment on, he couldn't get her out of his head. That's what happens when you get into someone's mind via their unconscious. You don't win them over with your body or a strategy. You do it through the silent impact of your depth. Carl Jung said that what we don't make conscious manifests as destiny. Well, you become that destiny when you make someone conscious of something that either confronts them or liberates them, without ever explicitly naming it. That's the ultimate power of a magnetic woman, her ability to enter another person's psyche not as an intruder but as a revelation. Because you don't invade, you reflect. And what you reflect isn't simple things. It's deep symbols, unhealed wounds, unspoken dreams, needs he can't even put into words. But there's one crucial key. You can't reflect anything that you haven't faced yourself. You can't awaken a man if you haven't awakened first. You can't be a mirror if you haven't looked at yourself with brutal honesty. That's why this is not a trick. It's not a technique for emotional manipulation. It's real psychic alchemy, energy vibrating with truth. Do you want to become unforgettable to someone? Then become the person who didn't flatter him, but who revealed him to himself. And not from judgment, but from a presence so authentic that he felt safe enough to see himself. Because a man might forget a woman's body, but he'll never forget the energy that made him confront his own truth. The energy that doesn't scream, but echoes. That doesn't impose, but leaves an impact. That becomes a presence impossible to erase from his mind because it reminds his soul of the things he still hasn't healed. And that's the secret. You don't get into his mind just because you want to. You get in when he realizes that you saw him beyond his masks, and you weren't afraid. You didn't judge him, you didn't try to manipulate him, you simply reflected him back to himself, and in that instant, your energy becomes a symbol. And symbols are never forgotten. And in the next section, I'm going to reveal something even deeper. How can you make sure that his desire doesn't depend on your constant presence, but on the psychic imprint you leave even when you're not there? Is all of this hitting home for you? Make sure you stay until the end, because what's coming will forever change the way you connect with others. If you want to live in his mind forever, erase the need to be chosen. This is the most powerful paradox of all. The more you need to be chosen, the more you erase yourself from his mind. The more you wait for a sign, for validation, for proof that he's thinking of you, the less you inhabit his unconscious. Because the male unconscious, and no one knew this better than Carl Jung, is not attracted to the woman who needs him, but to the woman who impacts him without needing him. You don't get into his mind when he misses you. You get in when he realizes that you could go on just fine without him. And yes, this breaks many of the patterns we've been taught. Because as little girls, we were programmed to believe that love is earned through total surrender, sacrifice, and absolute emotional availability. But what stays in a man's mind is not the woman who gave him everything, but the one who vibrated from her own center, the one who didn't rely on the relationship to feel worthy, the one who was so complete in herself that her very presence challenged his inner world. Do you want to be unforgettable? Then erase from your soul the urgency to be chosen. Eliminate from your thoughts that silent anxiety asking, does he like me? Is he thinking of me? Does he miss me? Because as long as that need is vibrating within you, your energy loses power. Your aura gets contaminated with lack, and he, even if he doesn't consciously understand it, senses it, because all human beings read the emotional field before they process words. That's energetic biology. Let me tell you a true story that makes all this clear. Marion was a brilliant woman. She had everything that's supposedly meant to keep a man from leaving: beauty, sweetness, understanding, intelligence. But deep down there was always something vibrating inside her like an unspoken plea. She didn't say it out loud, but her energy was screaming, "Choose me, please, choose me." And that thing that seemed so subtle ended up erasing her completely from that man's mind, because he began to feel that she was emotionally dependent on the relationship, and that killed the magic. Marion gave him everything except one thing: the mystery of not needing him. And that's where the magnetism died. Now listen to me carefully. This doesn't mean turning cold. It doesn't mean playing the game of indifference. It means choosing yourself so deeply that there's no room to beg someone else to choose you. It means loving yourself with such depth that if someone doesn't see your worth, you don't question yourself. You simply keep moving forward, because your value doesn't lie in whether you're loved. It lies in the fact that you already are love. When you release the desire to be chosen, something changes. Your energy becomes ethereal, strong, clean. You stop vibrating at the frequency of lack, and you rise to what Jung called the integrated self. That state of wholeness where you don't need external compliments to be who you are. And then the mystery happens. You start inhabiting his mind, not because you're chasing him, but because your energy has become archetypal. And archetypes aren't forgotten. They stay. They endure. True desire is born from freedom, not need. And the deepest connection a man can have with you is not the one who has you. It's the one who can't get you out of his unconscious, even when you're doing absolutely nothing to be there. Because that's what energetically whole presences do. They stay without trying. Carl Jung used to say that nothing has a stronger influence on the environment than a person's unworked shadow. And I'll tell you this, nothing inhabits a man's mind more deeply than the energy of a woman who has already chosen herself. So if today you truly want to leave a mark on his unconscious, to occupy a sacred place in his memory, his desire, and his most intimate thoughts, stop trying to be chosen. Do the most radical act of self-love. Choose yourself. And when that happens, you won't have to do anything. He'll remember you not for what you did, but for who you were. And that version of you, free, without emotional hunger, without strategies, will become his greatest addiction. And now that we've reached the end of this journey, you're about to discover the most powerful closing of all. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you is a truth that very few women have integrated. And it forever changes the way you're seen, desired, and remembered. Make your energy chase him, even when you don't. Here's the final secret, the one very few women know, and that radically transforms your presence in a man's mind without you ever having to pursue him, text him, chase him, or try to convince him of your worth. Because when you master this, it's his unconscious that starts seeking you out. And that's exactly what you need if you want to get into his mind and never leave. Most women who have been forgotten, replaced, or ignored have made one subtle mistake. They let their physical presence speak louder than their vibration. They were too available, too present, too visible. And when that happens, the mystery shatters. The desire cools, because the male unconscious is triggered not by the obvious, but by the symbolic. Not by what he fully possesses, but by what he can never entirely have. That's why, if you truly want to get into his mind, you need your energy to chase him, not you. And that happens when you do something almost no one does. You withdraw your body, your presence, your words, but leave behind your vibrational imprint like a sacred signature on his unconscious. You do this by moving with awareness, by closing cycles without wounds, by choosing your dignity without drama, by setting boundaries without resentment, by walking away, not because you're trying to manipulate him, but because you're no longer willing to beg for scraps of attention. When you do that, something inside him gets imprinted, because it's not about what you say, it's about how your energy embeds itself in him. And for that to happen, you have to leave something behind that time can't erase. And you can only do that when you act from an emotional strength that comes from your soul, not from your ego. Let me share a true story that perfectly illustrates this. Sabrina spent months trying to understand why the man who seemed so enchanted with her simply left without a fight, without closure. He just disappeared. At first, she chased him, wrote to him, explained herself, poured out her heart. Nothing worked. Until one day, she realized she wasn't going to beg for love from anyone. But instead of leading from a place of anger, she left from her center. She ended things with love, gave one last clean, honest expression of emotion, and then vanished. She didn't post cryptic messages, didn't share photos with hidden meanings, didn't flaunt herself with other men to provoke him. She simply withdrew in peace. But what that man didn't know was that in her silence, Sabrina left behind an emotional imprint so pure, so powerful, so elevated, that months later, he couldn't stop dreaming of her. Because Sabrina didn't leave a void, she left a presence without a body, an energy he couldn't replace. And the most powerful part was that when he came back, Sabrina was no longer there, but not with hatred. She was gone with an emotional truth that no longer resonated with what he had to offer. That's what happens when your energy chases him, even when you don't. He starts searching for you, but not because of any strategy, because his soul recognizes you as a symbol. And symbols can't be substituted. They can only be remembered. Carl Jung used to talk about how symbols rule our lives from the unconscious, and you can become one, but only if you learn how to master your vibration. Here's a practice you can start using today. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Visualize that person standing in front of you. Silently repeat, "I let you go, but I leave my energy within you. Not so that you'll remember me, but so that you'll heal with what I was." Then imagine yourself turning around and walking toward your own center, not toward another relationship, not toward another man, but toward you. Do this every night for 7 days, without seeking, without writing, simply dwelling in your highest energy, and watch what happens. This isn't about making him come back. It's about you learning how to hold a power so pure, so emotionally elevated, that your energy remains, even when you're no longer there. Now you know. You don't need to beg, you don't need to force anything, you don't need to chase him to get into his mind. Because the woman who truly masters her emotional field doesn't scream, doesn't demand, she simply impacts. Getting into a man's mind isn't about seducing him with your body. It's about leaving a mark with your energy. It's about reflecting back to him things he hasn't even understood about himself. It's about leaving with such conviction and such truth that you force him to confront himself. And when that happens, I assure you, there's no silence, no distance, no time that can erase you from his memory. Because when a woman becomes a symbol, she's never forgotten. She stays. But not everyone can achieve that. Only the woman who has learned not to betray herself. Only the one who has chosen to become unforgettable to herself before becoming indispensable to anyone else. Only the one who has transformed the need to be chosen into the strength of knowing she is enough. And if you've made it this far, it's no accident. It's because your soul no longer wants to beg for attention. It wants to become presence. So repeat this with me right now. Write it in the comments to seal it as a vibrational affirmation. I don't become his addiction from emptiness, but from the power of being myself. Write it. Declare it. Because when a woman speaks with conviction, her energy begins to inhabit places her words can't reach. And that's where everything truly begins to change. If this message resonated in your soul, it's time to take the next step. Subscribe now so you can keep raising your vibration with each new video. Give this content a like so that more souls can hear what set you free today. Share this video with someone you know who also needs to let go in order to heal. And of course, leave your declaration in the comments so that this message is imprinted into your energy. But above all, don't leave just yet. There's so much more waiting for you. Dive into the other videos here on the channel and keep expanding your energy and your power. I'll see you in the next video.